Hey guys! So today's video is going to be about a self-care technique that I touched on in my last video, which was my PCOS/weight loss story. And it's something that I have used pretty much on a daily basis since I started exploring it. And that is the mothering technique. That's just what I call it. I might not be the only one, and probably am not the only one to have come up with something like this. I don't know of any formal technique like this, but it's just something that I've used and I'm sure could help a lot of other people as well. So just to start off, I am not a certified counselor, psychologist, psychiatrist, anything like that. I'm just some schmuck that has dealt with anxiety and depression for a long time. You know, this is not any type of therapy, take my word with a grain of salt. This is just something that I have found incredibly helpful, and hopefully you guys will too. So the mothering technique is basically the idea that we tend to talk to ourselves in a very critical, negative way. A lot of the times our internal dialogue can be very toxic. We're very hard on ourselves as far as, you know, you shouldn't have eaten that thing, or how dare you, you know, think you're good enough for that job position, and you don't always recognize how intense and how demented, I guess, some of that language with yourself can be. But if you were to like speak some of it out loud or even write it down, it can be kind of shocking. And I actually do encourage that. If you find yourself kind of in a negative loop where you just are putting yourself down all the day, write it down and read it out loud, and it kind of makes you realize how ridiculous you sound. That sounds kind of mean, but it really does kind of put you in the frame of mind like, wow, I didn't realize how hard I was on myself. And we say these things constantly throughout the day. And I think it's not an uncommon problem to have, even if you don't experience depression or anxiety. I think to some degree, we all kind of have that voice at some time where we're disappointed in ourselves, or we feel like we could have been better, especially if we compare ourselves to other people. Those thoughts can get into a pattern, and it can put you in a really bad place for, unfortunately, a long time. So what I do is I've taken that voice of negativity that I've lived with for a long time, and I've replaced it with a voice that gives me unconditional love. And so for me, I chose the archetype of the mother because I can't think of a better person who will love you no matter what you do. I mean, even, you know, mothers of murderers and war criminals still love their kids. And so there's no arguing with your mom. In that sense, like, you can't argue your way out of her loving you. Now, I understand that I think using the archetype of the mother for some people can be painful. If you've had a really bad relationship with your mom, or you didn't have a mom growing up, I think trying to replace that can be very difficult and sometimes very painful. So feel free to use whatever voice you think is helpful. If it's your father, a guidance counselor, a teacher that you had once that you knew would always lead you down the right path, would never over criticize you, would always want what's best for you. Hell, even if you want to use your pet, I mean, anything that you know will give you unconditional love, that's all it takes. But I like the archetype of the mother because there are some truisms to motherhood that we've kind of accepted that I use on my own to kind of reframe those negative thoughts. So for example, a couple ways you can use this. A good mom is always going to be your best cheerleader. You know, when your son comes home and gets a B on a paper that he worked really, really hard on, and you know that he's improving, then a good mom would not say, well, it's not an A. Well, this isn't going on the fridge. She would celebrate. She would cheer for him. And sometimes that even means making yourself look ridiculous. For example, I remember recently I run a mile on the treadmill as like my warm-up. Every time I try to beat my previous time. And I remember when I got it under 9 minutes, which I think for some people is not that impressive, but for me it was a big deal. When I got under 9 minutes, I remember literally shouting like in the gym, like, hell yeah! And I got a lot of stares, but it felt really good to celebrate myself. And I know that was my mothering voice celebrating with me, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the first aspect. You always want to be your best cheerleader, and you know that a good, perfect mom would always be there to cheer you on. Another thing that is kind of known in motherhood that works in this situation as well is a good mother always trusts her instincts. This can take a little bit of time, and it can be hard at first to reword your thought process to the point of you can actually trust it. I know that is a little confusing, but over time, if you continue changing those negative thoughts to one of a mother in this case, eventually you're going to know how to trust your instincts and your mother's intuition. So for example, like I said in my last video, you can use it in a couple different scenarios, one of which is, for example, would your mother let you eat another slice of cake, or would she say, maybe you've had enough, maybe back off? And it really does take some intuition to know the right answer, because sometimes A is the right answer, sometimes B is the right answer. But a mom always trusts her instincts, and it's really about tuning in with yourself and knowing what will ultimately feel right. And you know, I think people at a base level always kind of know when something is off, and it's really tuning into that, into your mother instinct, or mother's intuition, and knowing when to push yourself harder, when to go for that promotion, and maybe when you need some more time. But that's something that the mothering voice really has helped me a lot, is trusting my own intuition. Another big one is a good mom always does her research. So I have a story associated with this. My sister, from a very young age, was diagnosed with a type of autism called Rett's syndrome. And it's a degenerative type of autism. She's nonverbal, basically has the same development as an 18-month-old. It's not a common disorder, and affects a very small number of people. But when my mom found out that she had Rett syndrome, she didn't just accept it at face value and say, well, this is our life now. A good mom, which my mother I would consider is a very good mom, a good mom would do her research. My mom would stay up into the wee hours of the morning getting any kind of information she could about autism, developmental disorders, Rett syndrome, although at the time there wasn't a whole lot of information out there. But she devoted her life to making sure that her child would have the best chance, and she knew that the number one way to do that was education. So the way you can apply this to your life is, say you have a goal. Let's say it's a, you know, you want to body build or build up muscle. The first step you do is you be a good mother and you do your research. And so you get articles here, books here, journals here, and you build up your education so you can better mother yourself and take care of yourself. And I think the last thing that is kind of a catch-all, I guess, in the end is there is no such thing as the perfect mother. Mothers are human and they make mistakes. You are human and you make mistakes. And so sometimes when you're trying to make the right call as your mothering voice, you make the wrong one. But you cannot just write it off as, well, this thing doesn't work. There's no point. I'm just going to go back to, you know, the previous way of talking to myself. At least then I was a little bit more motivated by, you know, being critical of myself. But what you have to do when you make the wrong choice, when you decide, man, maybe I shouldn't have had that extra slice of cake when my mothering voice said that I could or should, you have to forgive yourself and say, I am human and I made the wrong choice, but I still love myself and no one is perfect, and just keep on working on it. But really the key to this whole thing is you have to replace that voice with one of unconditional love. And if that voice is not your own, then you have to replace it with, in this case, an archetype that works for you, of someone who will love you unconditionally and will talk to you like you deserve to be treated. I think the last point I want to drive home is that I think sometimes parental figures can be seen as controlling, and I don't want that to be the takeaway of this voice. I don't want it to be like, if you have another slice of cake, you're grounded. That's not the point. It's more of this unconditional loving relationship with yourself where there is forgiveness, there's understanding, there's intuition. It's not, trying to put you in a box of rules. It's not trying to over limit you. It's just trying to find a better self-guide than one that is critical and demanding and all the other things that we tend to wrap ourselves up in mentally. So I definitely recommend you give this a try. Like I said, I use this on a daily basis. And, be your best cheerleader. Do your research. Trust your intuition. I mean, all these things, I have never been led astray by giving myself unconditional love. And it takes time. It's not going to work every time, especially at first. You need to build that relationship with this new voice in your head. So anyway, if you guys have any questions, leave it in the comments below. Thank you guys so much. And if you ever need to reach out to anyone about anxiety, depression, bad thoughts, critical thoughts, if you're having trouble using this technique, but you want to kind of still give it a try, feel free to always contact me, and I'll try to get back to you as best as I can. So thank you guys so much, and take care of yourselves. Bye.